So let us start straight away because actually, man, I'm not. I mean, that sounds very controversial to start. So, Dilip actually called me because I wrote a review of this book after this novel called Tumbo Sang got Booker Prize. I will read a bit from my review. But what I found exciting about this book, this is what I wrote in my review, three aspects. One is the characterization of Ma, Beti, Rosi characters. Second, the bold attempt of experimental narrative, epic quality. And which I also found something very, something I also identified in a writer like Olga Tokarczuk. She also got a surprise in the novel. Then writer like Bernard Justino, Human and London. So this is something, a unique quality that human novelist should represent in a deep characterization, a different take on characterization. Second, the old actions narrative explanation. And also bringing forth issues of crossing boundaries, translation of boundaries, etc. So this is also coming down to writing. So something making it a kind of a, let's say, a important world literature, contribution to world literature. So this was the aspect that I wrote about in my review. So, but this is the only novel that I think not only me, many of us have read your novel. I mean, we don't know about the other novels. I actually searched through online about the other novels that you've written before this one, the Hindi novels. So we'd like to, I thought I will start a conversation with asking you about your writing experience, the early novels, or the novels before this one, the first novels, and whether they were translated in English, I don't know. Because I searched online because I didn't get anyone. I think 2 or 3 are translated in English. So we can start a conversation with that, the original writing, the early writing.
Thank you, Ms. Damodar. But first of all, what a pleasure to be here. And it's a very, I can see a very sort of intimate gathering. So I hope the conversation will also be very intense and stimulating. I feel it's a little unfortunate that I have to talk about my own work when I have wonderful reviewers like you around. So I really don't know what to say about my earlier novels. I don't think a writer is the best person to evaluate and explain their writing, because I think the entire creative process is quite different. And we don't only write what we know consciously, and at least I'm not the kind of writer who writes with a set formula or a pre-plan. So I actually say, in some sense, I go on an adventure when I start writing, and then I see where the writing takes me, and it takes me in different directions every single time. So I feel I'm not the best person really to talk about these works. I'm surprised you didn't find them online, because they're all there. As it happens, 3 of my novels have been translated into English. Perhaps you didn't search well enough. Yeah, because I think there are not that many. And I've written only 5 novels to date, and 4 of them are translated into English, so I'm sure they are easily available out there. But I started writing very long ago. I mean, I think it's now at least 30 years since I've been writing. And my first novel was called Mai, which means mother in a North Indian, well, it's not what we understand as mainstream Hindi, but in UP, in a certain part, mother is also called Mai. So the novel is, that was my first novel. And it is a novel which, again, is set in a joint family, where here's our other conversationalist. Okay. So sit in a joint family, and there are different generations of women there, and there's the daughter, there's the mother, and there's the grandmother. And around them, things happen. It's a much smaller novel than Tomb of Sand, which is Great Samadhi in the original. And I just remember my experience of writing that novel, so I won't be able to tell you what it is. I don't want to tell you what it's really about. I'd rather you told everybody what it is about, because you'll do it much better than me. But I was a new writer at that time. I had written a few stories, and I came to what is called a writer's block, and I began to feel that there's something I need to write about the generation of women of my mother's time. And that became like, I did not know what I could write. I did not know whether it would be an essay or a story or a novel. I mean, I had just started my writing journey. But I felt that unless I wrote that, I will not be able to move forward. So even if it's going to be something completely terrible, even if it is something I'm going to fail at, I have to write about my mother's generation. It was like some very deep obligation that I owed to that generation for making my generation what it is. And that is how I started writing about Mai. And in fact, it started with some such statement, that unless I find out who Mai is, I'm not going to be able to proceed, but I don't know where to start. And it became a small novel about Mai. And I think it, in the process, questioned stereotypes about silence and bent women representing weakness, and the so-called feminist confrontationists and head up and sort of standing astride and looking very strident. The stereotype of them being the real warriors and those women being the weak ones got challenged in that narrative. And the novel was Mai. And some people say that where I stopped Mai, I seem to have picked up Great Samadhi, but I never thought that. That it is a Mai who was bent, who is now risen and becomes the protagonist in Great Samadhi, but I didn't have such a plan. So let me only talk about this one novel. The rest I'm sure you're going to find out, and you'll write a review which will be very good.
This novel also deals with the Ma-Beti relationship. And also there's a breaking of stereotypes, subversion of stereotypes, particularly in that relation. You find two different types of family structures. One very conventional, other totally non-conventional. So and how a kind of a love, a kind of friendliness is possible in the very non-conventional type family, where the mother-daughter relationship itself becomes more engaging and more emotionally binding. So can you tell us about the listeners also the relationship, which I think in your novel is repeated.
From first novel in this. Well, I think the family I have always, of course, I belong to a family, so it's very much the world I know. But apart from that, I think family really is the microcosm of whatever is happening in the larger society and the world. So if you sort of just get into the politics within the family, you're actually, it has echoes and reverberations which go much beyond the frontiers of the family. So I think the family has always been, for me, a very rich ground to wander in. That's one. About mothers and daughters, well, I think perhaps it just comes very naturally. that I have a special feeling for other women and for mother. I mean, I'm a woman, so I have a kind of some kind of sensitivity towards what a woman experiences. But still, I would like to think that I'm not exclusively only dealing with women and sensitive only to women, because I think a writer is not writing autobiography. I think a writer is trying to get into the skin of different, the other. So Tolstoy, who wrote Anna Karenina, Tolstoy. So he couldn't have written it if he didn't have that sensitivity. So I don't think we only write about ourselves, and I hope I also carry the sensitivity to enter different beings and write about them. But still, it comes quite spontaneously and naturally to talk about women, enjoy life with women. And mothers and daughters have usually a very special relationship. And again, I'm one of those writers who's going to say this again and again, that I did not have a pre-plan. And it was a discovery for me also, what the novel is going to shape into and where the story will go. But I've heard so many people who have read it say that it echoes, their own relationship with their daughter or their mother. And especially the changing equation of the mother becoming, in some sense, the daughter, and the daughter becoming the mother, and the mother becoming the younger person, and the daughter becoming the older person. So a lot of them really sort of feel equate with that and talk about it with a lot of fondness, a lot of stress, a lot of sense of oppression, but also a lot of sense of camaraderie. So,
what's most exciting that I found in this novel is the narrative experimentation. As you said, we don't know where this novel is going, or actually ready to it. So there is an epic kind of, it's a 750 pages novel, very big novel in that sense. Those came kind of also a big novel. And the interesting aspect of it is all the politics, social observations, everything comes in, like what Billy was saying. It's a non-representation, but it's a very interdisciplinary, very sharp observation of naturalism comes in, observation on generations comes in, family. So that, that experimentation is something which I found so exciting, and which we rarely find out. So the writing, it's women's writing, and I don't want to confine to some kind of gender writing, but I think in women's writing in fiction, you find this kind of bold explanation rather than in other writers.
I really wouldn't know. I haven't sort of looked at it like that, and I don't know if that would fit in the category of women's writing, so I really don't want to comment on that. But I think if you sort of just stay with that thought for a while, then isn't that how life, goes on? Isn't that how our daily lives go on? That very ordinary things are happening, but they come quite unexpectedly. They throw up, or they have a little echo with some political something, so that experience comes in small and big ways, in very ordinary confrontations of daily life. And I think the narrative somehow got into that way of going, and in the course of meandering into all kinds of terrain, these political details and other social details and bigger questions all started, threading themselves in. That is how it went on. Yeah.
Then you can see there are three parts. The first part begins with the traditional family, where the husband, the 80-year-old Ma, was lying. She looks at only one side. Then after that she goes to wait. Then after that to crossing the border. So in the first part we never expect that this is going to happen. So this is as I told we know as life goes on, there is this narrative that you take us to different kind of area with sharp observation, very very sharp political observation also.
Yeah. First of all, I apologize, Geetanjali. I was terribly trapped in the traffic. I apologize. Yeah.
It's not in your hands.
Yeah. I know I missed the beginning, so I don't even know whether some of the most pressing questions, those were, I mean, which were jumping out of my mind, have already been asked. Probably I will start by trying to get your attention to this fact. I know that a lot of people have called this a very extraordinary addition to the so-called genre of partition literature, which I know you have, what to say, kind of dismissed as limiting, and rightly so. Because this indeed is a work of epic scale that very, I would say, very elegantly depicts the fluidity of borders of all types and the need for border crossing across religions, region, gender. And going by how the discussions have been around this work so far, I think enough attention has been paid to both the region's border and the religion's border. But what I have been like very intrigued by, not on any comparative scale though, is how very subtly you have nudged people to see the fluidity of gender. So for example, about Rosie, you say very beautifully, how can one person be so many things, flow in many different directions? And Ma herself at a certain point in the course of the narrative starts appearing like she has a bit of Rosie in her. Also, when the daughter behaves in a certain way, we kind of start seeing the rigid stereotypes of the gender being starting to look little shaky. So have you felt that two things basically. So how do you view the fluidity in gender as equally important when it comes to border crossing? And do you think in all the debates around the work so far, this aspect of gender has been kind of overlooked?
Well, this aspect of gender has certainly been overlooked in the case of this book. And again, I have no expertise to talk about the discourse that has been going on in the field of art and in a larger way. So I wouldn't be able to comment on whether there has been a similar neglect out there. But perhaps there is, I mean, my suspicion is there well might be. There is a sort of non-acknowledgement of the fluidity of gender. And I think for a long time the world has been divided primarily into a very male and a very female construct. So I think it is only in recent times that it's been there before. Perhaps in practice it's been there, the fluidity of gender. And I'm not only talking of the third gender, I'm also talking of the mix of gender attributes in the male and the female. So I think it's been there and it's been played on in very different ways, but perhaps not become an intellectual discourse till recently. Now, why did I go into this direction? Again, I'll go back to my same line that I never planned anything in that way. But I can't help it. I'm living in a world where things are going on. I'm living in a world where certain certain things are coming to the foreground like not before. And I think gender has been one big issue. And for me, the triggers, like I said, can be very small. The triggers are from something in daily life. And I'm sort of breaking my own the sequence a bit, and I'm going back to say something which I wanted to say when you were speaking. I'm really glad you brought up Rosie, because very few people have spoken about Rosie and what all she represents. But I have wondered where I got Rosie from. I know there are characters like this, of course, and I remembered one or two things, but one was actually a very personal memory which has no great significance and there's nothing very sustained about it. But my mother, who used to live with my brother, at that point my brother is no more, so she used to live with my elder brother, and who was a bureaucrat, I must say, and my mother said, "Come sit here." And the person said, no, I mean, I can't. So my mother said, no, of course you can, you come and sit here. And my mother had told me this, and she said that, she made her sit there. And then they started meeting in the garden, and they used to talk. And I don't even know what she talked about. I don't know what she told my mother about. I know that she used to come and visit my mother during festivals, and my mother could never invite her inside. So she used to sit in the lawn and meet her and give her whatever, I mean it was Holi, Diwali, whatever. So that bit of thing, and only once when I was leaving, I think I was getting into the cab and my mother was standing outside, and this person came, and my mother said, and she said, "Namaste" to my mother, and mother said, "This is my daughter." And she put her hand on my head. That was all. So so it's strange that it was such it was some story which I hardly really knew, but somewhere it went inside me. I mean, in my conscious I was not thinking about it, but somewhere it went inside me, and this character emerged in the course of writing this novel. And then I began to think that somewhere I was very fascinated with the fact that my mother is not at all some, fiery feminist or standing for, LGBTQ, etc., those rights or anything. Her mother's not into that ideology at all. She did whatever she did out of just a very natural, spontaneous humaneness. So I found that so natural, so touching and so real that somewhere it stayed and it came and joined the story, and the character became a full-fledged character. After that, imagination also does things. You know about all kinds of other stories, and somehow it became such a character. But I think for me, somewhere it is very touching. And I think somewhere me and a lot of us actually feel disturbed by rigid borders of any kind, whether in identity. So in identity also, I always feel, why are you trapping me into being that I'm a woman? Why are you trapping me that I'm of this religion? Why are you saying this is where I belong? I actually always want to spill across the borders. And I'm not talking only about myself, I'm talking about a lot of people who feel like this today. And all that made stories which were fluttering inside me and wanting to emerge, and got their chance with this book.
Yeah, that kind of reiterates what you have said time and again, that you don't really plan for these things to happen, which I think also manifests in the way you place story or storytelling as supremely autonomous, almost to the point of where I felt even the author was like made subordinate to it, right? Of course, I know that it's not the first time something like story being supreme is being tried successfully as a literary artifact, but I think you've taken it to a completely new extent, where I felt like here is a story, which is a living space. People come and go, characters come and go, add something to it, take something to it. Much the same way readers come and go, take something, add something, make something out of it, etc. Almost to the point that I think I wanted to say this. Those who have read this, there is a certain point in the story where the author says, those who are very keen on following everything with documented clarity are free to leave the story here. the story is moving on, but henceforth you will, and you put it beautifully, I'm just trying to capture the essence of it. But henceforth we are only going to make those shadows, so you're not going to get anything which will look absolutely clear. If you are game for it, come along. So how do you really think this way of making the story, like, or reasserting the unquestionable autonomy of the story, how is that going to help you as an author? And was this a very conscious construct that you wanted to bring to it?
Once again, I think every answer I can start with my first sentence, that I never plan anything deliberately and consciously from the start. That can be as, I can just put it on a placard and pick it up first and show it to you every single time. But in fact, Krishna Softi, the writer I've dedicated this book to, somebody asked her a question about, how does she decide, where to start the story and where to end it. So she said, if I know how to end it, there's no fun in writing the story. So she says, the fun of it is not to know where you're going. So to some extent, I think a lot of writers, and I'm one of them, goes in that direction. But I would say that it's not therefore something completely anarchic and mad without a method in it. And when I say that a story writes itself, I don't really mean that there's God's hand, unless God is something like the instinct which is inside me. So, but I'm saying that there is, over the years, in the course of honing my sensitivities, with my reading, with my experience, with other people's experiences, with our history, geography, etc., etc. I mean, whatever, we don't even know what all collaborates to go into making one's way of seeing and being and expressing. Over the years, that's what is your intuitive sense. And it is becoming richer. And you're not fully consciously aware of it. But everything is there, or lots of things are there. The stories are there, and the directions the stories can take are there. The aesthetic sense is also there. So you may not quite decide or know it, but it is there to help you with time to cut, time to let it stand in a pose which looks like it's going to topple over, but you have to stop at the point where it will not topple over and actually become a beautiful dancer's pose. All this is guided by that instinct, by that intuition, if you will, which is your education and imbibing of so many things over the years and perhaps even before you. And all that is what is helping me take that along. I'm sorry, I lost a bit of what you asked.
No, otherwise,
yeah, so the story being autonomous and taking its own course. So it looks in that sense like it's taking its own course, but it is being guided. And it is being guided by something in me without my being fully aware of that. That's what I'm trying to say.
Very interesting, I would say. I understand you decided to...
So you were saying about Rosie. I think Rosie is the most important character. So Rosie in some way manifests the difference between the partial literature and the post-partition kind of literature, because it is just because of Rosie actually Ma goes to cross the boundary. So in partial literature, what we find...
Not just because of Rosie. She also goes for her own self.
Yeah. But in partial literature, what we find is a different statehood, different kind of narration, because most of the time novels are translated to Malayalam, so it's of the language. But here you find she represents, not she, Rose represents in that sense a kind of post-national ambiguity, a post-national question, because that it's a post-national issues that is manifest in novel, post-national conditions, where the borders have become fluid, it has become a state of flux. So, I mean, how do you, and most importantly, this was also discussed when the government agencies were issuing circulars that the partition trauma needs to be remembered, things like that, which also, I mean, many government agencies issue circulars to universities, colleges to remember the partition trauma, etc. So, this was a kind of a Sufi experience, a crossing of boundary, a new kind of hope, as well as. And also, I mean, I just want to know how this novel was actually received in Pakistan, and this novel was received.
Well, it hasn't yet come out in Pakistan. I think some people have read the English, but it's not yet, there for everybody. I think the Urdu novel is coming out now, and I think they have liked it. I know a writer who's doing the Urdu, and he's a big writer out there. I discovered later. And he wrote to me, he said, whether or not you give me permission, I have loved this novel and I'm going to translate it. And he says, if you don't give me permission, I will say that this is a novel based on that. But I am going to translate it, I am going to publish it. So, and he said, I just love it, I'm doing it out of love. And if you have an agent, tell the agent to get in touch with me. Your publishers are not great, they don't give anything much, but if you're expecting something, I'll give it to you out of my pocket. So I said, no, it's not about the pocket, it's not about the money, but I would like to know who's doing it, what's happening, etc. So he would just write every few weeks and say, I've done 1/4 of it, I've done half of it, now I've finished it, and I'm publishing it. So I think there are people who care for the book. He used to work in the BBC, and for some reason he also knew Hindi. So he read it in Hindi and in English. So I think it looks like there will be a very receptive readership there. Now even as I speak, I say it is unfortunate that a lot of the time there are ideological reasons for liking something or not liking something. And I'm not very happy for the readers I will get in Pakistan merely because ideologically it pleases them. I wouldn't be very happy for that because, for me, ultimately this is also, this is a literature. I would like it to be appreciated for its literary qualities and not for the ideological, side it represents. So to that extent, I'm sure there are all kinds of reasons for it to get a positive response in Pakistan. I get that feeling.
Right. Probably I think we could get some questions from all of you now.
I love the novel. I just want to know the third portion of the novel. All this, because Mandu is coming and he's saying this is a very famous story. Where is that place? So I think the whole novel is actually looking into that concept of the place. After the partition or whatever, where it belongs to. So even I think why the Pakistani writer says that I will publish this, and I can tell this is a novel depending on this novel. Because he to have that kind of a right, I think. Because it's like, when Manto is sitting there, or the writer you acknowledging in the book, Softy is sitting there, that was the very wonderful garden. That might be the wonderful garden in the novel, I think. That's one thing I want to just make comment. And also I was highly impressed of the translator's translation, of course, hence otherwise I couldn't read it, even though Amit Shah is imposing Hindi. I don't want to be that kind of Hindi, but now I have a regret I couldn't read it in Hindi, because I never learned Hindi in that way.
I want to interrupt one moment. If it's Amit Shah's Hindi you're going to learn, you still won't be able to read it.
Thank you. So, I just want to tell you about the translation. The translator is using a word, a phrase, Hindisk, like what we use, Kafka's and all. But in Kerala, we have a problem with the translation. I think the translator have a very, very big role in this kind of a process. But here, our great intellectuals, writers, are still says that a translation is a minor art. But in European music, minor is actually a major scale. So you hear people say it's a minor art, and also as I worked with some of the writers, and I told them in this novel, can we just edit this portion, or can we just change this, or can we just? They said always they say, don't touch a single word, don't touch any single alphabet. But when these people are getting translated into English, see, 5-6 novels I know. I read all the translation, and I found that even some of the characters are not in the English translation. Not even the chapters. So many chapters are skipped out. But our writers have no problem with that. But if a Malayali editor in a Malayalam text, if someone is editing, they will make a lot of issues. And I just want to know, how the translator and you are working with this. Because I just want to repeat that I don't know the idiom of Hindi, Hindi what you use, because I couldn't read it. But I still feel an idiom of Hindi in this translation. So how do you feel? How do you just want to make a comment on that?
Yeah. About the translation, I have actually such a lot to say that I'm worried I will not be able to say everything, but I'm going to try it. See, one is, I think the kind of Hindi I use is extremely eclectic, and as a matter of fact, a Hindi which does not believe in borders. So therefore, it is a very free Hindi which is very happy to borrow from wherever it comes in contact with whatever language, whatever way of speaking, etc. There's nothing pure about my language. There's no attempt at purity. Partly, it comes from a great disadvantage that I had in my education, which was not to learn Hindi as a proper subject. It was an elementary subject for us. That, I think I've been lucky, I've been able to turn that to my advantage. So I don't carry the baggage of this Amit Shah Hindi. So I'm very free in the way I use language. It's a very eclectic language that I'm using, which I think has served Daisy well, because it's already a language which is so flexible, so fluid, so happy to borrow from here and there, so with porous borders, that she could do something similar in the English, and she could retain Hindi where she wanted Hindi. So there's, this impurity and eclecticism of the language actually helped her to do the translation in a way that it really did do justice to the spirit of the original. The other thing with Daisy was that it was a very interesting experience, because I didn't know Daisy, before this. And for a long time I thought, because the publisher who approached me is British. So she asked me whether I'd be happy to get this new novel published by her, and I said yes, because nobody else had asked me, so I said yes. Then she said, and we'll look for a translator, and she got Daisy to contact me, and Daisy sent me a sample, and we would have met, but then we ran into the COVID years. So we never met, and I thought for a long time that Daisy must be somewhere in England. It turned out she was American. Anyway, so then we were just writing to each other. But the kind of questions she was asking, the kind of details she was, pointing out to me and working with, gave me a sense that here's somebody who's engaging with the humor and inventiveness and all the twists and turns and tweaks of the original with great love and involvement. And that gave me a lot of faith. And it was excruciating to answer a lot of those questions, because, like I keep saying, I wasn't only writing consciously. much of the time I was not writing terribly intellectually or consciously, but I had now, for Daisy's questions, I had to almost research my own book. Where did I get that from? Where did I get that word from? Why that word? Why that color? So I had to sit and do research and answer her questions. But it made for a relationship of great faith between us, trust and faith. And mostly I think we managed to agree on how we were going about things. Even where there were problems, we could tell each other, no, I think it's this, I think you have to do that. And she's done amazing things. I haven't read the whole of the English book, but I've responded to the bits that she would send me, or sometimes when I'm made to read and Daisy's not there, then I read some part and I'm very pleased with what she's done. She's done parallel inventiveness in English, like in the crows section. So in the crows section, I made up a lot of those words in Hindi. She didn't do a literal translation. She played with the language and used the word crow to invent words as well. So I think this love that both of us individually had for the text made me, I knew that she was doing good work, and I was ready to be reasonably detached from the work. But I think I would have been completely different from the other writers you're talking about, who become very agitated if anybody here wants to touch their work and are ready to compromise with the English. I would not, I would be detached in the same way with both, and not allow either to do certain things. And while I'm at it, let me just give this last little detail also. The title was one thing I never agreed about. Because in Hindi it is Reth Samadhi, and in English it is tomb. Tomb does not carry the meaning of Samadhi at all. So I said it just doesn't convey it. You're talking about a corpse, and I'm talking about a live state in which the person transcends, crosses some border into some other realm. So this was one battle I lost, because the publisher felt that if we give it, I said put Samadhi there or put meditation, do something, but not tomb. So the publisher felt that any such word would make the buyer who comes into the shop and looks for the book, they think it is some exotic Eastern book about yoga and meditation or something. And they said, we don't want to mislead them like that. We want it to sound like a novel like any other. So we don't want it to be. So I said, okay, you do what you will. And Daisy then said that in the book, I will use the word Samadhi repeatedly, and I'll make sure that it's, seen for what it is. So that is the only place where I had to compromise because of the publisher. So just a few thoughts that your question set off in me.
I think there is curiosity about how you cross-references Sakariya's story, Babuka's music. So I'd love to know more about how you establish those connects.
Well, I think, again, the stories that I have read, the writers that I have liked, I'm carrying them in me. And just as, Hindi writers of partition, they came into my work. When I was writing about, I don't know what it was that I was writing about, I remember this particular story by Paul Sakariya, which I had read in English. Zakaria or Zakaria? Zakaria. So, and it's a favorite story of mine. I really can't remember the title, but I think it's such a lovely story. So it just came to me at that point, that art, you're talking of the music, but actually it also means art and literature. So art and literature is higher than God. Art and literature is higher than religion. So it is a slightly naughty thought which came, and the story also came to my head. And there's another story of his when they want to find someone to look after mother. And there's that, I think it's an amazing story of this NRI son. You know, and he advertises for the nurse to look after the mother, you know, I remember that, and I think I practically put in the entire story. So when I gave the book to Paula, when I told him, so he said, of course he can't read Hindi, and that time the book had not come out in English. So he said, just show me the page where I am. So I told him, that's where you are, and now you're famous. So that, you know, that's how writers that I have, who have inspired me and whose work I've cared for, wherever they link up with the story, they have walked in.
After reading, so I called Sajan, but that time he was abroad somewhere, so he didn't take the phones or WhatsApp the pages, and he told me he didn't know what this was. At least that was the time.
He didn't know. He was playing innocent.
Very excited, and he told me a very good friend of him, and I WhatsApp all of pages. No?
He said he didn't know that he was figured in the book.
He was just.
You asked him again.
That is you have given him in Hindi novel, no?
I gave him the Hindi novel.
And then I think it's been a very delightful evening, as I'm sure it's profound. And Geetanjali, it's been a true honor for all of us to have you with us today. And I hope you had a chance of getting a feel of story, Calicut hospitality, Kozhikode hospitality, which is generally both hearty and sublime, I think. So great to have you here. And on behalf of all of us, thank you for your great literary body of literary work. Thank you for giving Tomb of Sand at a time when worldviews which are liberated and borderless are coming under threat from all kinds of corners, for giving us this modern, powerful, modern classic, which is very powerful in its rebellion against borders of all kinds. And I think that's an extremely significant piece of work in the times we are living. Thank you so very much, and thank you for being with us today. Thank you, everyone.